Alright, what's good, people? You know who it is. It's your boy Hustler88. Welcome to this channel. I know it's been a minute. I have been posting videos in a while. I've been busy. Have a busy life, but let's get back to this video. This is not what this topic is about. This topic is really about the PlayStation 5 specs. They went into the specs, they dived deep into it, the presentation from yesterday. And I saw the presentation. I'm going to give you my pros and cons towards the presentation. I'm going to start with the cons first. The presentation of itself was not bad. It was just the way Sony had marketed. I forgot the guy's name. I think his name is Mark. But he actually marketed the PlayStation 5. And with the PlayStation 5, he actually, it's like a lecture in class. It's like every time when a professor speaks, it's like he speaks for hours and hours and hours until you get bored. It's the same thing with this presentation. He didn't present it in a way that people can be awoken, can be intrigued, does want to watch the presentation. He didn't show any demonstration. Microsoft did a good job of presenting their specs, the SSD. I'm going to get into in a minute. I'm going to read an article. I'm going to present an article at the bottom of the description so you can look into it. But what Sony did, Sony should have at least demonstrated an example of how fast the game plays. Now with Microsoft, they got, I think it's 12 teraflop, and Sony has 10 teraflop. But I'm going to read this article for a minute. The article is from Kotaku, but let's see. Let's read this right quick. I'm not gonna read the whole thing. I'm just gonna read a snippet of it. So it says, this week we learned that the technical specs of the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. How do the two consoles stack up so far? Despite only knowing what one of the two looks like, they are not so different, X and 5. So the teraflops now with the PlayStation 5 is 10 and the Xbox Series X is 12. So the teraflops doesn't make a difference. The teraflops is actually means the process, how powerful it is in terms of the functionality of it, in terms of how the games function. Because certain games may not function properly, may not function as fast than the others. So we don't know. So it says, before we get into it, keep in mind that these are just numbers on the screen as far as we're concerned. We've seen a couple of tech demos for both consoles. So the CPU, so the PlayStation 5, the Custom Z2 CPU with 8 cores at 3.5 gigahertz variable frequencies. And then with the Xbox Series X, you have Custom Z2 CPU with 8 cores at 3.8 gigahertz spontaneous multi-reading. So basically, I saw the demonstration of what the Xbox Series X had demonstrated on the YouTube, because I saw videos on YouTube on that. And basically, as you plan another game, you can pause that and play it. It doesn't have to you don't have to close it out. You can just actually play it while you plan another one, which is crazy, right? So it says there are 2 custom versions of the CPU built using the AMD Zen 2 microarchitecture, the same microarchitecture that powers the 3rd generation of Ryzen PC GPU. What's the difference is how the two consoles utilize their CPU power. Microsoft says that the Xbox Series X CPU is fixed at 3.8 gigahertz for games, reliant on the single core, dropping to 3.66 gigahertz for application that takes advantage of multiple cores via spontaneous multi-thread reading. So basically, you could play multiple games at once, which is crazy. And then Sony says that the PlayStation 5 CPU, GPU both run at a variable frequency. So variable frequencies is actually how it's different. It could be different depending on the CPU, depending on how fast the game plays. So it says the console will constantly monitor the demands the game puts on the CPU and GPU, adjust frequencies accordingly. This novel approach to balancing power and cooling means the system should run at a consistent power level, making it easier to cool. So basically, when you're playing the PlayStation 5, it's not gonna you're not gonna hear that noise like you normally play. When you play a particular game, you're not gonna hear no noise at all. It's gonna be quiet. It's gonna play smoothly. But they should Sony should have at least demonstrated how the game should play, how the game is going to be played, because the SSD, you can actually, with the SSD, it depends on how many gigabytes it is. If you got more gigabytes in SSD RAM, is more likely to play smoothly. So it says, then you got the PlayStation 5 customers RDNA 10.28 teraflop, and then the Xbox Series X, and then you got 52 CU at 1.825 gigahertz. So basically, the Series X got 12 teraflops, and then the PlayStation have 10 teraflops. So just because it has more teraflops doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna play is more powerful than the other system, because the PlayStation 5 could be powerful than the Xbox Series X. I'm no dissing against Xbox Series. I'm not dissing it, because I own the Xbox One and the PlayStation 5. The reason why I gave away the Xbox One is because there was not too many games that was coming out. The thing I don't like about Microsoft is that they don't produce games that exclusive games. They don't produce a lot of exclusive games. I might get the Series X. I don't know. I'm gotta look into it right now. Maybe later on during the years I might get one, but the meantime, I'm definitely getting the PS5. I'm definitely pre-ordering the PS5. So it says, as with the CPU, both consoles use variations of the same basic hardware. In the case customs AMD, the RDNA stands for Radiant DNA, the architecture being MA most graphics cards. In terms of teraflops, the Xbox One has small leads. So it says the teraflops is a measure of the process mathematical progress. For every teraflop that processors can calculate, a trillion floating points calculating per second. So during the presentation from yesterday, they showed the numbers of the SSD, where they show the speed, and then they divided by that number, and they gave you, because actually with the PlayStation 5 it's supposed to load much faster, meaning that you don't have to wait to play a game. You can actually play it when you cut it on, and it actually automatically gets you to the game, instantaneously gets you to the game. So computer units are CU, which is computer units, are like clusters of tiny CPU the graphics process unit uses to compare stuff. The more CPU, the more powerful the GPU. Comparing the CU between the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 is much more telling than teraflops. The PlayStation essentially has the equivalent of the Radiant RX 57 graphics card, while the Xbox Series X of the Radiant RX Vega 56. I'm not a geek person. I'm not a geek spec, but I do know a lot about specs, because I've been going to YouTube videos, researching YouTube videos about the specs and how it runs. Because when I first got on YouTube, I didn't really know anything about 60 frames per second, but now I know a lot about it now. I know a lot about specs. I know about, because you have to really get into the details of what the specs are. And people that was looking forward to the console was disappointed and it was boring. That's the reason why people didn't like the presentation, which I understand. But Sony got to get that stuff together. They got to make sure that they put themselves in a position where they have to like step it up. They got to step it up a notch. Microsoft already did that. Microsoft already stepped it up a notch, but it's time for Sony to step up to the plate and show some more details. They already present the information. They already present the specs, but they didn't give out a lot of specs. They didn't give out a lot of details. I think they just taking that time to just do it one day at a time, like one day at a month of a time. But so it says PlayStation 5. We're talking about memory now. So let's see. Both consoles. Okay, the memory is 16 gigabytes, and then the Xbox Series X is 16 gigabytes. So the bandwidth is 448, and then for the PlayStation 5, and then you got the Xbox Series X 336 gigabytes. So it says both consoles, including the 16 gigabytes of GDDR memory. The PlayStation memory bus is narrow. It says 256 megabytes of the Xbox 320 megabytes, which means that there are more lanes to traffic available on the Xbox. Well, that makes a massive difference. Probably not. What's the difference is how memory bandwidth is handled on the console. PS5 memory runs at a speed of 448 gigabytes per second across the board. The Xbox Series X splits its 16 gigabytes of memory into two sections. There are 10 gigabytes of GPU optimal memory running at 560 gigabytes and 6 gigabytes in standard memory running at 336 gigabytes. Slow to standard memory is located to operation sounds that don't require a lot of speed. So I'm not going to get into that. So basically, we'll get into the RPG class. So bandwidth, I think with the bandwidth, you can pretty much, it's based on speed. So it says the PlayStation 5 memory runs at a speed of 448 gigabytes per second across the board. So the SI, actually, when you're playing at an interface, you're playing, it's like let's say for example the PlayStation 4. Every time you play the PlayStation 4, it depends if the speed can go fast. It can be really going fast per second, but I think with the PlayStation 5 it can go even more faster. So it says slower standard memory is allocated to and sounds that don't require a lot of speed, while GPU optimal is geared towards making things pretty. So it make it more easier for you to get into the game without waiting for a long period of time, without the process going too slow. And the RPG glass, it says the information we have now, it looks like Microsoft and Sony rolled two different characters from the next round of the consoles wars or RPG. Microsoft puts most of its points into strengths, creating a beefy machine that can't be matched in terms of power. Sony, on the other hand, creates a much more agile console, sacrificing power for utility. So it's all about the quality. It's not about the power. It's all about the quality. It's all about gaming performance. Without the gaming performance, it wouldn't be playable. You know what I mean? Do you get my point? Then they talked about like the audio interface, the audio, and then you got the racing tracing. where the graphics gonna be more detailed, it's gonna be more in depth than the one that we currently in, the PlayStation 4. But yeah, just tell me what you think about this video. Leave your thoughts, comments, like, subscribe, and I'm out. Deuces, peace, salute, God bless.